Good. Hello and welcome everyone to the What's New in Red Hat OpenShift 4.17. I'm CMX Adaganfar from the OpenShift product management team, and I have a number of colleagues with me who will be helping me walking you through the exciting capabilities that we've brought to you throughout this release. Whether you are familiar with OpenShift from the past, a seasoned practitioner, or new to OpenShift, I think it's useful to look at how it underpins the Red Hat Open Hybrid Cloud platform. Starting with the operating system, our immutable container-optimized operating system, Red Hat Enterprise Linux Core OS, got you covered. Whether you run on bare metal servers in data center or on small devices at the edge or on virtual machines in private or public cloud. OpenShift at its heart is Kubernetes, which we ship to customers with a convenient installer with an efficient over-the-air update and content catalog of content coming from Red Hat, and also a large ecosystem of partners. And using this content catalog, you can extend the capabilities of the platform, perhaps add service mesh capabilities to it, or serverless and function computing, CI/CD and GitOps style of continuous delivery, and many more services. And once you grow this number of clusters that you have into a fleet of clusters, then you can implement a cluster management layer, which allows you to implement fleet-level security policies, and vulnerability management and CV scannings, cluster lifecycle management and orchestration, global registry, and distributed storage across the services, which are all bundled together for you through OpenShift Platform Plus. And all of this is available to you whether you want to run and manage this entire stack yourself or consume it as a managed service from our public cloud partners. And we don't stop just there. So through Application Plan Notion, Developer Services, and OpenShift AI, you can extend the capabilities of the platform even further in a truly open and hybrid fashion. So now let's have a look at what's coming to you through the core Kubernetes update.
Hi, good morning. So we'll talk about the upstream first. In OpenShift 4.17, we have CRYL 1.30 as well as Kubernetes, dubbed Kubernetes 1.30. In Kubernetes 1.30, we have a number of improvements to pod security and management, as well as workload management improvements in order to keep them safe within your cluster. I'm going to highlight two enhancements that are graduating to stable, one of which was the container resource-based pod autoscaler. This was highly anticipated and allows the horizontal pod autoscaler to automatically scale based on resource consumption of individual containers as opposed to pods. Additionally, we have the improvement to, or rather the integration to Common Expression Language, or CEL, for admission control. This will provide the ability to create much more fine-grained policies directly through the Kubernetes API, and will be a nice improvement for cluster admins. Finally, we also have a notable beta feature that is going to be coming to you, which is the user namespaces for pods. This enhances pod isolation and will help to mitigate high and critical CVEs. Next. On top of that, we're going to discuss the downstream. In the downstream, we have a number of customer-driven features. This slide will show the top features delivered in 4.17 as driven by customers. Firstly, we have seamless offline migration from SDN to OVNK. The goal was to reduce the number of manual processes, as well as reduce the complexity of migrating from SDN to OVNK. Similarly, we have migration from SDN to OVNK when there is a NIC bonding on the primary interface. Additionally, we added 4 and 5 node control plane architecture support for bare metal clusters. This was designed for traditional applications such as OpenShift virtualization VMs. This will help to improve the resiliency of clusters with active deployments. Finally, we have a number of improvements for OpenShift on the cloud. Firstly, for GCP, we are allowing the support for custom tags when using OpenShift provisioned resources. And additionally, in AWS, we are adding support for IAM instance profiles during installation. Next.
All right, we have a lot of capabilities brought to you through the 4.17 release, and we're going to get to the detail of all of that. But before that, let's look at some of the highlighted features in this release. And these capabilities span across many of the core platform capabilities that we will talk about, some of the virtualization and virtual machines that are running on the platform, the hosted control plane, and the components of OpenShift Platform Plus.
Hi. So OpenShift Lightspeed is tech preview now. It is a generative AI-based chat assistant. It is available to operator, which will add a UI chatbot in OpenShift UI console for today. And through that UI chat console, user can ask OpenShift related questions. There is a attached feature where user can attach pod resources like YAML, events, log, and ask some follow-up questions like, inspect the pod or understand the error in the pod. Today, we support some of the LLM providers like RHEL AI, OpenShift AI, OpenAI, Azure AI, and watsonx. Next slide, please. User namespace. So with user namespace, user can have a different user ID within the container and on the host. So for example, within the container, a user can be a root, and on the node, it might not be a root. And this solves many of the high and critical CVs today. Next slide, thank you.
In 4.17, we have some important networking enhancements I'm going to talk about today. There is a larger project that Red Hat OpenShift Networking is pursuing named Universal Connectivity, which aims to provide seamless integration between our default networking of Kubernetes and customers' external networks and targeted networking solutions that cross over that boundary. Native network isolation for namespaces is a first output of that effort and introduces at the first Z-Stream release of 4.17 a technical preview of a Kubernetes networking first, which is user-defined networks, or UDNs for short. So traditionally, the cluster pod network would be a monolithic layer 3 network across all the cluster nodes. And if you wanted a different network, you had to load one or more additional CNI plugins. Those secondary networks are good enough for some deployments, but they do not have all the advantages of a Kubernetes primary network and can incur problems like increased complexity, additional operational burdens, not to mention that not all of Kubernetes networking supports those Multus-enabled secondary networks. With user-defined networks and its newly added VRF support, you're now able to carve out additional isolated by default primary networks for your pods and virtual machines. There will always be a default network for Kubernetes control plane traffic, like for pod health checks and such. But you can think of UDNs as tenant networks, and each can host multiple namespaces. Pods and VMs can designate a primary UDN, which is basically where all the traffic will flow by default, and then any number of additional UDNs after that, each for a specific purpose of your designation. All the UDNs have support for cluster IP services and external services like the traditional Kubernetes primary network, and they fully support Kubernetes network and admin network policy. Overlapping IPs between UDNs are handled by Oven Kubernetes so that tenants are independent from each other. We will not break customer deployments that are currently using the traditional Multus-enabled secondary networks, but we expect that new deployments will prefer to use these UDNs to carve out those additional networks going forward. A couple of examples shown here. First, you now have the ability to create a flat layer 2 network as the primary network across your cluster for live migration of your VMs across nodes. Secondly, you can also now directly attach your VM or pod networks to a provider network. And in fact, you can have a combination of the two. There's other examples that you may be able to imagine. In a follow-on release, we will provide BGP and EVPN support so that your pods and VMs are directly addressable within the cluster without having to traverse NAT at the edge of the cluster. And we will continue to spotlight these UDN enhancements in future releases. Next slide, please. eBPF Manager, also known as BPF Man in the upstream community and its CNCF sandbox, is technical preview at 4.17 and will enable internal teams, partners, and customers to manage eBPF program execution and visibility on the platform. So what's the need exactly? Well, eBPF programs allow developers to create a user space program that has kernel space privileges to observe and affect network traffic. Because of this power, and especially in multi-tenant environments, administrators want to be able to govern who is able to execute those eBPF programs, what those programs are allowed to do, and have the ability to observe all eBPF programs on a system. The eBPF Manager targets that additional level of security and scrutiny that does not exist elsewhere in the Kubernetes marketplace. And it also strengthens, of course, eBPF implementation security. So in this tech preview, the eBPF Manager will function with customer deployments and, at least initially, only be integrated with the OpenShift Networking's ingress node firewall. But in future full release, it'll be fully integrated with all of our current and future Red Hat internal eBPF implementations, to include things like ACS, the Network Observability Operator, and Kepler. Next slide, please.
All right. Hey, everybody. OpenShift 4.17 is just the first installment in a series of new major features that enhance cluster administrator clarity and control. The first chapter is the GA release of node disruption policies. Now, historically, the primary reason we insisted on the discipline of reboots was the safety inherent of making sure that your change not only works, but survives a restart. In general, if it's going to fail, it's better to fail fast and find out while it's fresh and you know what you changed. That said, we heard you. And sometimes as an administrator, you just know that you don't need a reboot to update sudo rules or change your SSH configuration. And it's certainly not worth shuffling workloads around for trivial changes. So no disruption policies allow for all of that. All you need to do is write a new config file. If all you need to do is write a new configuration file and bounce the service, now you can do it without rolling the cluster. That's right. Go ahead, reconfigure the system, a system service in the middle of the day. You have the power. Next slide.
In this release, we are introducing for the first time support for 4 or 5 node control planes. With this, we introduce more resiliency, being able to distribute your control plane across 2 sites and tolerating the failure of one site completely and stay in business while you fix it. This has been designed for traditional applications, OpenShift virtualization VMs in mind specifically, but any stateful application will benefit from this, having a control plane that's fully responsive after the failure of up to 3 nodes. This is supported in OpenShift 4.17 on the bare metal platform only. Next.
Thanks, Ramon. For OpenShift virtualization, we've been very busy all this year delivering a lot of new functionality, and you're going to see our last release here deliver things that we've committed to for 2024. So the first big one is memory over subscription, which allows higher workload density. This is actually very useful for dev test environments where you actually want a lot more workloads on there than you have physical memory for. And then also memory hot plug. This actually completes our dynamic plugin, dynamic reconfiguration story for all virtual machine components. So that's disks, NICs, CPUs, and now memory. We can also rebalance workloads as you're running along, whether you're upgrading the OpenShift cluster or different workloads start and stop on different times. The descheduler will now move both pods and virtual machines. That's been tech preview for a while, and we're now moving that to generally available. The other one is storage live migration. This is one thing that actually we taught Kubernetes how to do, to actually move PV, either hot or cold, from a running virtual machine. And that is tech preview right now. And that will allow you to move data from one storage class to another, which can actually be on the same physical array or storage provider, or you can actually use it for an external storage lifecycle event, where say you want to move from one storage array to a different storage array. The other thing that's also exciting and probably one of the most visible changes is the virtual admin perspective. So just as we have a cluster admin perspective and a developer perspective, there's now a virtualization perspective. And this it actually makes it focused on all the virtualization aspects of the OpenShift cluster and removes all the other things that aren't directly related to that. So if you're a virtualization admin, you can actually dive in and get find things to do right away without the clutter and noise of other things going on in the cluster. The other thing is MTV itself has gotten a lot of changes. Its version right now shipping is 2.7. So make sure you've got the latest and greatest as you're migrating virtual machines in there. And actually static IPs are something that's been around and actually working in this particular release. Next slide, please. So just as the core virtualization team has been busy, we've also been busy making the fleet management of a set of clusters running virtual machines much easier. So earlier we had introduced the health check of the operator. We now have the ability to look at virtual machines across the fleet. So you can actually filter and search for individual sets of virtual machines. And then you can actually drill into either the metrics, the configuration, or any alerts on a particular virtual machine, which is very good for troubleshooting. The other thing is there are also a set of pre-built displays which will show you virtual machines in unhealthy states. And now we're going to pass it over to Jochen.
Thanks, Peter. And now available is also a test your workloads with a confidential compute attestation operator. Red Hat continues to provide a high contribution to confidential container operations. And as an important part of the journey, we are proud to introduce our attestation operator. Together with OpenShift Sandbox containers, the confidential compute attestation operator, which is based on the community trustee project, provides attestation services for confidential container workloads. Attestation to retrieve container image signing or description keys, and attestation for releasing application secrets. With this release of the confidential compute attestation operator in combination with OpenShift Sandbox Containers 1.70, customers can unlock Kubernetes secrets after successful remote attestation. The attestation operator is currently available as a tech preview for AWS and Microsoft Azure as well. Thank you. And next slide, please.
All right, thank you, Jochen. So now we're moving to so we looked at the features, the highlights. Now we're looking at how do we use these features at scale? And we're starting with hosted control planes. So hosted control planes, in case you have not heard about it before, is a form factor of OpenShift that allows you to optimize your total cost of ownership for your OpenShift fleet of clusters. And in this release, we're having a platform and reliability improvements. For example, we're introducing backup and restore, not just using your etcd backup, but also using OpenShift APIs for data protection to back up your hosted cluster resources, your node pool resources, and all the resources required to represent in OpenShift cluster within hosted control planes. Additionally, we're improving the platform in different ways. So we're improving our disconnected install experience. There has been a couple of issues that have been fixed around image streams and registry overrides for node pools and hosted clusters. And then we're also introducing NVIDIA GPU support on OpenShift virtualization hosted clusters. So this will allow you to run AI workloads, and you can pass GPU devices to your VM workers on a hosted cluster, which will enable you to run a variety of AI workloads. And then we're also making improvements and enabling actually multi-architecture configurations, including ARM control planes with x86 or x86 control planes and ARM data planes on AWS, but we're also GAing on Z and Power workers. And then finally, you're now able to import your sub management cluster. So in case you have a hub cluster with multiple children hub clusters, these hub clusters can also expose the hosted clusters to the global hub clusters, enabling you and giving you a single pane of glass and visibility over your entire fleet. of hosted clusters. Thank you. Next.
Cool. Let's talk a bit about Red Hat Advanced Cluster Manager for Kubernetes. So in addition to Rackham's new VM observability features that you heard about in the Spotlight section, let's also look at some other cool things we're adding to support your virtualization infrastructure. We've enhanced ACM search feature to work even better, so you can locate virtual machines across multiple clusters and search and filter VMs based on those various attributes. And one I know you've all been waiting for, we've added the ability to stop, start, restart, and pause VMs directly from ACM. So no more logging into all your clusters or writing helper scripts. Simply use ACM and gain better control of that virt infrastructure. We're kicking this off as dev tech preview and are very eager for you to try it and share feedback. Next slide, please. Let's look at some other features. There's a lot, so I've just highlighted the top few. Let's start off with some governance highlights. ACM continues to embrace GitOps with further integrations with Argo CD. So you can synchronize policy template types such as configuration policy or operator policy directly to each cluster instead of only via a hub-driven policy resource. In our observability highlights, we're adding a brand new standalone Thanos operator. This new operator enables easier configuration options and more efficient management of logging, tracing, and interoperability. So for ACM, the benefits are through an opinionated Thanos operator CRD combined with Red Hat guided customization capabilities. And we're also releasing as dev preview the multi-cluster observability add-on for logging, tracing, and OpenTelemetry. With this add-on, ACM will more easily be able to automate the collection and forwarding of all your observability signals from your clusters. And there's even more advanced management. One is custom messages. I love this one. With the new custom messages field in the configuration policy spec, you can update ACM policy output to provide more helpful information. So alerts can now include foreign characters, so we can do multi-language, emoji, so we can have more fun, variables, and templating. You can also export ACM and MCE templates as CSV. So this is helpful if you find that you need to get information out of ACM and into other systems easily and quickly. Maybe you need to download the results of policy violations for audit purposes, or even distribute them to other teams or third-party tooling. Finally, we continue to support HCP by making it easier to use the latest deployment methodologies like CAPI, ROSA HCP, like CAPI from within ACM as dev preview. That's it from me. Next slide, please.
Thank you. So let's look at updates for our security features, which I will cover in the next 3 slides, starting with our compliance operator updates. So our compliance operator is an offering that lets OpenShift administrator describe the compliance state of a cluster and provides them with any gaps and ways to remediate. So in this new release, we bring support for PCI DSS version 4. This will help customers get updates to the latest benchmarks in the payment industry. In addition, we are also updating DSysTig to V2R1. This will help comply with any latest changes from the Department of Defense. Next slide, please. So as you can see from this slide, we bring to you a very feature-rich ACS 4.6. Let's look at some of the details of the features, starting from the very left. So we have improvements in the areas of compliance. We continue to invest and help our customers bring the latest standards from the payment industry. Additionally, we are incorporating a reporting feature that will let you download and share your compliance results externally. Now, big improvements coming in the area of VUL management, vulnerability management. We are adopting the CSAF VEX format. So this format helps standardize how organizations communicate exploitability information. It helps reduce false alarms, improves your decision making, and prioritizing security responses to make it very clear which specific vulnerabilities impact the products. This also helps with efficient patch management, better resource allocation, and faster mitigations. With our 4.6 release, in addition to the CVSS scoring from NVD, Red Hat images will now appear in ACS with Red Hat vulnerability impact to help easily assess if any action needs to be taken for that image. Now, Scanner V4 went GA in 4.15. With this new release, we also include capabilities for node scanning. With our 4.6 release, we also provide integration with ServiceNow vulnerability response. This will help reduce manual effort, minimize the risk of unaddressed vulnerabilities, and ensure compliance with latest industry standards. Looking at some of the exciting improvements in the area of platform, Very excited to bring you the customers that are managing policies at scale. We now expand our policy functionality to manage code with Argo CD. Additionally, we are looking to expand our support for ARM architecture for secure clusters managed by ACS. For our customers that use Microsoft Sentinel Notifier, now we are going to provide integration with ACS, which will send all of the ACS alerts and audit events to Sentinel. By doing so, we enhance our security monitoring capabilities, enable a unified view of incidents, and streamline the incident response process. On the networking front, we are including IP address to external entities as tech preview. This will help customers identify problems and threats early on and address it in a better way. Next slide, please. So this is the final slide I'm going to cover, and it talks about updates to our ACS Cloud Service. Our ACS Cloud Service adheres to key global standards. They are listed here in the slide, ensuring exceptional security, compliance, and data protection for your business. These certifications highlight our commitment to safeguarding your data and ensuring compliance with latest international standards. Thank you, and next.
In this episode of What's New, the Quay team is excited to highlight 3 latest updates that enhance security, access, and automation for managing your container images efficiently. The first, augmented auto pruning policies. This new iteration allows multiple rules per policy and pruning based on tag patterns. Each release, we are adding complexity to this feature so that you can optimize storage, maintain a cleaner registry, all while ensuring your important images are safe with us. The second feature I'd like to highlight, keyless authentication. This new feature allows users to securely access Quay using short-lived, regularly rotated tokens instead of traditional passwords. This not only improves security by reducing the risk of credential theft, but simplifies the authentication process as well. And the third feature of the day, certificate-based Postgres authentication. This will add a layer of protection for your sensitive data by enabling Quay to authenticate to PostgreSQL. Overall, these updates collectively strengthen Quay's capabilities, making it an indispensable tool for managing your container images securely. Thanks. Next.
For observability, we are happy to announce even more enhanced ways that you can gain insights into what's going on in your OpenShift cluster. For our OpenTelemetry build, we have an integrated console now so that you can directly see the observability signal information delivered to you through the OpenTelemetry collector. In addition to this, we have some enhancements for OpenTelemetry like certificate rotation, metrics transform, and Prometheus remote write exporting. For distributed tracing, we're very excited to say that we have a Gantt chart now available within the OpenShift UI. So you can take a look at your tracing requests and get some context on those and get more information about your tracing spans. Next. So we've also happy to release the tech preview of the cluster observability operator version 040. One of the big enhancements here for observability signal correlation is that there's a troubleshooting panel built into the web console. So some of the nice things there is that gives users enhanced usability because you can now see what's happening in your correlator journey, and you can also get more visibility into the queries from correlator and also select the depth of those queries. Next slide. For OpenShift monitoring, one of the big features is that Prometheus can now tolerate the scrape timestamp jitter in the workload monitoring. This is really nice because the timestamp jitter correlations will reduce the size of the disk usage from Prometheus, so can reduce it up to 50%. In addition to that, we have some other improvements like CVE fixes and updated monitoring stack components. Next slide. In OpenShift logging, we have our logging 6.1 release. This is going to feature a tech preview of end-to-end OTLP support. So cluster logging operator can forward logs through OTLP either to an external endpoint or to our internal Loki log storage. Loki log storage can store and view logs sent over OTLP from both the cluster logging operator and the Red Hat build of OpenTelemetry. And also those logs in Loki can be viewed in the OpenShift observability UI in the OpenShift console. Next slide.
OpenShift Observability and Red Hat Insights team are happy to announce development preview of incident detection for OpenShift Container Platform. This feature helps pointing cluster administrator to issue resolution faster, utilizing both contextual and time-based alert grouping. Next.
Hey folks, so for every release, we like to focus on direct customer enhancement requests. We call these console RFEs, and our goal is essentially to provide customers happiness, right? So for the first item on the list, we've added the ability to show non-admins warnings about their pod disruption budgets, allowing them to take a corrective action. Next, we added support for Git T. This means you can easily import your Git projects into OpenShift from the dev console. Also for the dev console, we've enhanced pipelines by allowing users to set a timeout period before running the pipeline. On the admin side, we enhanced the machine config views to include the details of the configuration files via the details tab. Finally, lots of customers want the ability to customize the project creation modal. This can be achieved via the new dynamic plugin extension. As always, we're very pleased to provide our customers exactly what they ask for in every release. Next slide, please. So quick recap. Dynamic plugin framework is the best way to build native experiences directly into the OCP console. So for this release, the team's been really busy creating materials to help you build, manage, and maintain your plugins. We've added lots of cool stuff, starting with the project reference table. You can now easily find some great real-life examples, even a fun example that delivers a plugin with its operator called catfax operator. On top of that, we added tons of documentation in the I18 end section to enable your plugins to support localization of one of the languages that we support. Finally, one quick note, we are targeting Patternfly 6 design library support in 4.19. This means we will be dropping support for PF4 at the same time, so please plan accordingly for your plugin. Next slide, please.
Let's take a look at some of the key updates in the developer tools ecosystem. I only got 4 slides, so I had to pick the most important ones for you. Don't forget to check out developers.redhat.com for even more coverage. Let's start with the IDE plugins that work with latest OpenShift. You can take a deeper look at all the features following the links provided. My personal highlights are actually for VS Code and IntelliJ. You can now create deployments using a build config and configure Helm chart installation directly in the IDE. And it's also a lot easier to install Red Hat Developer Hub directly with a Helm chart from within the extension. For Quarkus tools and EAP, the release introduces JBoss EAP 8 support for both VS Code and IntelliJ. The new Quarkus plugin for IntelliJ provides health check diagnosis at startup and more robust handling using Vertex. And the large server protocol plugin was also added particularly for IntelliJ. It's a free and open source client compatible with all IntelliJ flavors with a full guide available on GitHub. Next. And on to dev spaces with version 3.16, which is based on Eclipse Chase 7.90, will bring you a ton of updates. And again, it's just a selection of new features. Make sure to check out the details in the full release notes. Firstly, there's now a warning when you start a cloud development environment from an untrusted repository. This helps mitigate the risk of launching workspaces from unverified sources. We've also introduced the use of Fuse Overlay FS storage across all workspaces. This provides optimized storage usage and significantly improves build times for Podman and Builder. Lastly, we've also automated Podman login for external container registries. This will now basically automatically happen during workspace startup for any registry that you have configured in your user preferences. And next, another brand new release comes with Red Hat Developer Hub 1.3, which serves as the internal developer portal for OpenShift. So we've grouped the highlights into 2 main categories. One's the core features and the plugins and templates. We've added support for an external Redis cache, which improves better scalability and performance for stateful applications. And OpenShift Dedicated is now fully supported. What is super important is the new custom theme composability, that you can basically use a dynamic plugin to completely customize the Red Hat Developer Hub. And there's also a new release of the Dynamic Plugins Developer Guide, which basically makes it a lot easier to build these plugins. The new bulk import plugin allows users to import Git organizations and repositories into the catalog more efficiently. And for VM users, you can also see VMs directly within the topology plugin now. And finally, the software template that has a special place in my heart because it gives you access to some ideas and pre-built software templates you can use. It's kind of your starting point whenever you want to start working on your own golden path templates. Next, please. And finally, let me introduce you to the latest release of Podman Desktop 1.12, which brings significant updates, especially for AI applications. You can now manage all your remote Podman machines directly within the user interface, which basically just streamlines your workflow, which is what we expect from such an amazing tool. We've also added GPU support for macOS and Windows, which enhances the performance and capabilities for local model inference. And one of the most requested features is finally out of the experimental phase. Podman Desktop has a light mode now, which makes it so much easier to work with and read, and I love it. For all the details, make sure to visit podman-desktop.io, and please don't forget to give it a star on GitHub, because SEALs love collecting stars. So thank you so much. Next.
Okay, I want to talk about two particular products in our Runtimes portfolio. One is the Red Hat build of Quarkus. So the Red Hat build of Quarkus, the next release is version 3.15, which will be released in the next 2 or 3 weeks here at the end of October. The Red Hat, or the build of Quarkus in general, is really for applications job applications that need to run on OpenShift for the high performance. So with that, we've got a couple new features in this release. One is improved integration with Red Hat Developer Hub, making it easier to pull down templates, Quarkus templates, to start creating applications quicker. We've got some security improvements, which include the automated generation of TLS certificates for development, and also a unified and consolidated configuration. We also have support now for a number of tools and libraries to support front-end web development, including support for Web Bundler, HTMX, and Web Components. And lastly, another big feature is the ability to monitor containerized Java applications using Java Flight Recorder on OpenShift. So pretty good stuff there. Next, we've got the migration toolkit for applications, version 7.1, which was released in August of 2024, so just a few short months ago. For those who don't know, Migration Toolkit for Applications streamlines the process to migrate and modernize apps onto OpenShift. So in this particular release, there's a couple new features which we want to point out. One is we have rules now to support the migration from .NET Framework to .NET Core, which was a big request from some of our customers. So that's a nice feature. There's also automatic language and technology discovery for applications. So what this will do is it'll go through and do the analysis behind the scenes and identify the different technologies and frameworks and associate them with archetypes. Additionally, if there are any Java applications that use Gradle for dependency support, they are now that analysis is now supported. That is in tech preview, as well as we have another tech preview called Analysis Insights. So this provides pointers on where and how certain technologies are being used in an application. So it's kind of underneath the scenes again, kind of showing you how technology is used, which is a great feature. And lastly, we've got task management, which includes precise information about what is up next and what is queued for the migration toolkit applications. You're able to see it in the UI now. So this allows users to, preempt tasks to prioritize according to their needs in every environment. And that is it. Next.
Thank you. We'll start with Service Mesh, which helps you create secure, reliable application networks with automated MTLS encryption, zero trust policies, and visibility with metrics and traces. We have some big news. Red Hat OpenShift Service Mesh 3 is now technology preview on OCP 4.14+. It's based on the very latest Istio and Kiali, and it is installed with a brand new operator using Istio-based configuration schemas. It adds new features such as Istio's multi-cluster topologies, namely multi-primary, primary remote, and external control planes. To provide peace of mind during upgrades, we've also added support for canary control plane upgrades, and there's a lot more to come in the future. As this update will include significant changes to how Istio is installed and managed, we highly encourage users to try it while it's still tech preview, and to not hesitate to create support cases for questions or provide feedback directly through your Red Hat account team. Note that for current production usage, OpenShift Service Mesh 2.6 remains generally available. Next.
OpenShift GitOps had the 1.14 release alongside 4.17. It brings you a new Argo CD, and some of the new capabilities include the multi-source application. It's a tech preview feature, and we're building more capabilities around it before it reaches GA. So it is visible, it's accessible through the Argo CD dashboard now. Rollback is supported. These are applications that you want to deploy as a combination of multiple Git repos, or perhaps a Helm chart that comes from the repository and values YAML that comes from a Git repository. There are improvements around the performance of Argo CD, different sharding algorithm, and some improvements about config so that every change doesn't cause a reshuffling when sharding is enabled. And we focus a lot on customer requests and RFPs in each release. One of the prominent ones is that in Argo CD, we have the ability of validating the GPG signature of Git commits before deployment to the clusters for supply chain security. That ability didn't exist for application sets in particular, so that ability is also added in this release.
So with OpenShift 4.17, we will be releasing OpenShift Pipelines 1.16. Some of the key updates in OpenShift Pipelines 1.16 are, first, the step actions will now become generally available. Step actions offers you a powerful way to script and reuse units of work within a step. This improves the reusability of pipelines and making it easier to compose and maintain workflows. You will also find the step actions integrated into the Red Hat Tecton catalog. Next, we have enhanced the integration of Tecton chains with MongoDB, which is used for storing the provenances, and HashiCorp Vault, which is used obviously for the signing. Also in chains, now you can run in selected namespaces. This enables you to progressively roll out chains across your Tecton deployment to achieve the software supply chain security. Moving on to another big pain point on Tecton was the Tecton task results size limit. Many of you have encountered problems because of this when you are dealing with larger artifacts. We have solved this by enabling larger task results through the sidecar logs. And finally, for the observability, we have strengthened Tecton results by integrating it with OpenShift logging and Loki. We have also introduced new log retention policies, giving you more control over your logging and monitoring. Finally, in the console itself, you can now find more integrated experience for Tecton observability for the in-cluster objects as well as the objects from Tecton results. Next.
OpenShift Serverless is an add-on operator that elevates OpenShift to OpenShift++ for your containerized microservices and functions. It is based on the upstream project Knative, and with 1.34 release, we would update it to Knative 1.14. With this release, we are introducing tech support for Golang functions, expanding the language options available to developers, and the CLI has been enhanced to simplify the process of subscribing to events, making it easier for you to build event-driven applications. Leveraging Keda CMA, the platform now supports automatic scaling of Knative Kafka triggers based on workloads, ensuring optimal resource utilization. In this release, we are also introducing as tech preview the encryption for both internal and external service hops, providing a higher level of security for data in transit. We have also added support for startup probes that will help to reduce cold start times, resulting in faster application startup and improved performance. And for serverless logic that provides capabilities for building complex workflows and orchestrating microservices, we have added capability to access OpenAPI specs definitions across multiple namespaces so that you can have greater flexibility for defining and managing APIs. And this also facilitates your distributed application architectures. Another thing for serverless logic is we are introducing as tech preview a management console image to streamline your development process. We are looking forward to your feedback. Thank you. Next, please.
Builds for OpenShift 1.1 is released as well. This is based on a shipwright upstream project. As a part of this release, the shared resource CSI driver is reached a GA status. What this driver does is that it helps you have a secrets and config maps in not one namespace, but mounted inside of pods in other namespaces without having to duplicate it. The main use case for it is when you want to build Docker, build images using Dockerfile, and within those Dockerfiles, install rel RPMs. You need an entitlement for that. And those entitlements are available on the cluster. They're automatically refresh and put in a namespace on the cluster, but somebody has to duplicate these into the namespaces where these entitlements one needs to be consumed. So this driver makes that really easy to just configure it, and it puts it in those namespaces that you need as a CSI volume inside of pods or builds or take-down pipelines or shipwright builds when you need to build those Dockerfile images. There is also enhancements come in this release into console to be able to import from Git through a shipwright build and build the image through the shipwright build. The build page, the shipwright pages inside the admin perspective is also restructured to surface all the resources of shipwright directly through the navigation, so you can easily get access to it.
Thanks. For this release, the supported providers where you can install OpenShift remain the same. We continue to offer 4 use case driven installation experience that provide different levels of control and automation. The first one is automated or installer provision infrastructure, where the installer controls the full installation experience, including infrastructure provisioning with an opinionated best practices deployment for OpenShift. The next one is a full control or user provision infrastructure, where you are responsible as a user to provision and manage your own infrastructure, allowing you for greater customization and operational flexibility. Next one, interactive, or this a connected experience using assisted installer, which provides a web-based user interface that guides you when you create a cluster. And finally, a local disconnected experience with agent-based installer that provides a streamlined method to deploy OpenShift on restricted environments like fully disconnected or air-gap environments. Next. Let's review some of the highlight features that we are adding in this release, specifically for cloud users. With this release, you can install OpenShift Container Platform on AWS by using an existing identity and access management instant profile. We are also adding AWS Elastic File Service usage metrics, allowing you to monitor how much space is used by the EFS volumes. This feature is now generally available. And lastly, for AWS, OpenShift now supports AWS placement groups partition numbers, allowing users to specify the partition number within a placement group machine management. This is an extension of the existing capability when using pre-created placement groups. For Google Cloud, you can now pre-create the service accounts used by the installer in order to fully control the permissions of the service account that the installer uses. For self-managed OpenShift on GCP, we have added support for GCP Private Service Connect, especially demanded by highly regulated customers with strict security and compliance requirements who need to deploy OpenShift clusters in a private and secure environment in Google Cloud. We have extend GCP workload identity management to OLM operators, so this can interact with the cluster in a specific way to leverage GCP workload identity federation-based authorization. And finally, for GCP, we are promoting custom resource tagging for OpenShift in GCP to GA. For Azure, we have added capacity reservation for machine management in OpenShift. This lets users to configure machine sets to deploy on a specific pre-reserved resources that match the parameters of a capacity request that users define. These parameters specify things like VM size, region, and number of instances that you want to reserve. This ensures that critical workloads have the resources they need, even when the demand is high. For hosted control planes on Azure, which is the preview, as I mentioned before, we have enabled the CSI stack in the management clusters.
And finally, we have added support for a new region in Azure, is Azure Spain Central region, where you can deploy OpenShift now. Next.
So for OpenShift on-premise, starting by bare metal, we are introducing a very extremely simple way to manually add nodes to existing clusters. More of this in a minute. Similarly, on VMware, you will be able to do this, and we're also adding support for multi-vCenter OpenShift clusters, meaning that you can add yet another layer of high availability to your topologies. Moving on to Nutanix, we are introducing support for virtual GPUs or pass-through GPUs to the worker nodes that you deploy with Nutanix. That's on day one. Similarly, for multiple disks. And we're introducing support for Nutanix's, this is the overlay network. It's called the Nutanix Flow Virtual Networking. And this opens the door for many new use cases related to multi-tenancy. Now, IBM. In IBM, there's been focus on feature parity. An example is the scheduler plugins support now in IBM Power and IBM Z. And there's also focus in trying to make use of these unique capabilities that these high-end machines have. And an example of this is the hardware-based root volume encryption that's supported in IBM Z with this release. Moving on to multi-arch, three things here. So first, we are GAing the multi-architecture tuning operator. With this operator, you can run workloads on the matching architecture of the nodes, OpenShift nodes. The second one is multi-arch can be now configured on day one. So the installers now will let you to deploy on different architectures from day one. Up until now, it was a day two operation. And finally, hosted control planes support for IBM Power and IBM Z. Next. Okay, and a feature that I just mentioned in the previous slide. We are super excited to announce this feature. This is the GA. We have been doing a developer preview up until now, from which we have collected a lot of feedback. And with this, you can manually add nodes to any cluster, regardless of how you installed this cluster, in a super simple way. Essentially, you just create a boot ISO image. You create an ISO image, you boot the ISO image, and your new node is added to the cluster, and that's it. And support for this is in the OC OpenShift client. This supports multiple platforms, and since this is based on existing technologies, that is the agent service that we use in the assisted installer, in the agent-based installer, it comes with features like validation. So we are really excited with this new feature and looking forward for additional feedback on it. Next.
So for Shift on Stack, we're excited to offer two new features. One is exposing the Shift on Stack metrics to the OCP cluster. So this is the first step in getting those workload to infrastructure metrics correlated, so customers can have the insight that they need so that they can balance their OpenStack infrastructure and help prevent the hotspots that degrade performance. And secondly, using root volumes to support master nodes. So customers need this when they have large or multiple clusters. This gives a lot more stability to high-performing or high-churn control planes by letting you use local performance storage in those compute nodes. Next slide, please.
So the team has been working hard on the OC Mirror v2 tech preview based on your feedback. Today, I'm excited to call out two highlights. Firstly, in addition to other performance improvements, we've also expanded OC Mirror v2's capability to better support HyperShift KubeVirt deployments in disconnected environments. Previously, OC Mirror missed mirroring the CoreOS image required for these deployments. So now we've ensured that all necessary components are mirrored and simplify the deployments of the disconnected HyperShift KubeVirt clusters. Secondly, we've also improved the user experience, especially for EUS upgrade. Now, OC Mirror will detect version gaps between the min and the max versions, and then guide users to add those intermediate versions to their Mirror channels for a smooth upgrade. So all in all, we are excited about these improvements, and we think you will be too. Next slide, please. Hand it over to Roman for control plane.
Okay, so in this release, we are also introducing in the control plane certificate rotation improvements. The first one is automatic certificate rotations. So essentially, when a certificate is close to its expiration date, it gets automatically rotated without intervention or manual action. The next one is automatic control plane recovery from expired certificates. We are automating the recovery for example, when you hibernate, so to speak, a cluster, and when you bring it back, the certificates have been expired. In this release, we manage this use case so the servers can be back up with no problem and no manual intervention. Next.
Hi. So optimize cryo storage byte for reboot. So what happens is when a node is abruptly rebooted, let's say somebody pulled the power cable, when node comes up, it downloads all the images again just to make sure there is no corruption of images. Now think about edge and telco use cases where bandwidth is low, and it takes time to download all the images. So for that to suffice those use cases, we have introduced the way where node understands that, hey, these are the only corrupted images, and I'm going to download only those, not the full images. So it improves the boot time for those edge use cases. Thank you. Next slide and next presenter.
Thanks, Graf. So we covered a couple of big enhancements already in the spotlight section at the beginning of the presentation regarding networking. But there were many enhancements to OpenShift networking in 4.17. So let's talk about a few more that were highly anticipated. So first, we added a technical preview of OVN observability. With configurable sampling, you'll be able to correlate OVN network flows with network policies. So that, for example, if traffic is not flowing where it should, you'd be able to identify whether or not it was a Kubernetes network policy problem, and if so, which policy is the culprit. We also added support for Kubernetes NM state on Azure for operational ease. We also have a number of network component version upgrades, such as HA proxy got bumped from 2.6 to 2.8. The Red Hat AWS load balancer operator, also known as Elbow, was upgraded to 2.8, and Core DNS was also upgraded to 1.11.3. Finally, an additional reminder that the OpenShift SDN CNI plugin was deprecated several releases ago and is no longer available for 4.17 deployments. Any cluster still using the older OpenShift SDN plugin must first upgrade to the OVN Kubernetes plugin before upgrading to 4.17. To do that, we provide support for both limited live migration and cold migration options. Customers installing a new 4.17 cluster will automatically get the modern and vastly more capable Oven Kubernetes network plugin. Next slide, please. Close to the 4.17 release, the independently life-cycled network observability operator got a new version, 1.7. In this version, we have several highly anticipated features, the first being the operator no longer requires Loki for the majority of its features. This simplifies its installation and reduces resource requirements for those deployments that are resource sensitive. Version 1.7 brings another major new feature, a technical preview of the new on-demand observability command line interface tool, the CLI, so for observability. So many of our customers prefer the command line for extracting and parsing network information. So this feature and the immediacy of observability output that it provides has proven really valuable to those customers. Our customers also have asked for a way to define their own metrics in the observability operator. And so we have delivered on that ask by providing a CRD-based metrics API. Other enhancements to the network observability operator include a modernized deployment of the eBPF agent for newer kernel optimized functions, reduction in log size using dedupe functionality, control of where the eBPF agents are deployed in the cluster, and finally, the ability to configure eBPF flow captures using filters to focus the capture and also reduce resource consumption. And finally, for on-premises deployments of OpenShift, we now support an alternative to the configure OVS script, so that OpenShift deployers can explicitly configure the BRX bridge to their exact specifications at install time and can modify it afterwards using standard networking tools. Next slide, please.
Thank you. So today I'm excited to talk about some improvements coming to the operator framework. Let's start with making your life easier. So picture this, like some of our customers, you have dozens of operators running on your clusters and you want to make sure they are not out of support, right? So for that, we are introducing a new feature that provides a clear visuals of deprecation status directly in the OCP console powered by the OM APIs. User can see right away if an operator is outdated and what to replace it with. This feature also helps stop them from installing old stuff and give them a clear path to upgrade. Meanwhile, we are also working hard to make these features, new features available for more operators so you can manage them with less hassles and keep them within the support boundary. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about the next generation OM tech preview. We've packed this release with features that makes OM v1 safe, secure, and ready for the future. One of the big highlights is safe CRT upgrades. It helps prevent data loss by detecting the schema change to CRDs so you can upgrade smoothly. Secondly, OM v1 now makes sure only one cluster extension can manage a resource at a time to avoid conflicting reconciliation. We've also tightened the security. OM v1 now use separate service account for installing and upgrading individual content, adhering to the least privilege principle. And we've also added HTTPS to keep your catalog content safe. Looking ahead, we are also paving the way for Helm chart support in the future. So all in all, these enhancements shows our dedication to manage operators and eventually broader content a safe, secure, and declarative experience with the next generation OM. Next slide, please.
All right, let's talk about what's new in storage. For VMware vSphere, as mentioned earlier, we added tech preview support for up to 3 VMware vCenters without shared storage. Also in tech preview is the vSphere CSI driver, which now can be disabled, as well as different alerts coming from the vSphere problem detector. This is useful for customers who have OpenShift on vSphere but provision storage by other means. On AWS, we've added an opt-in that allows customers to monitor how much space is being used by volumes provision using the EFS CSI driver. On Azure, we've added Azure File Snapshot support as tech preview. And on GCP, when you're uninstalling OpenShift in GCP, the file store volumes are now automatically deleted unless explicitly untagged. And then lastly, on the SE Linux front, we've now added a developer preview for the very much anticipated SE Linux mount feature for RWO and RWX volumes. This feature solves issues where pods might take a long time to start when volumes contain a large number of files. Do give it a try and let us know what you think. Next. For OpenShift Data Foundation 4.17, let me highlight 2 of the major updates. Following ODF 4.16.2 version, where customers were introduced to the capability to use ROSA with HCP or hosted control planes with self-managed ODFS tech preview, we're now making this capability GA in ODF 4.17.z in an upcoming Z stream. For VMware customers, you can now use VMware vSphere 8, which has been fully tested with ODF. In addition, we've added the option to create new CephFS storage class with 2 replicas to improve efficiency where it makes sense. This is similar to the replica 2 support in block that we introduced in previous releases. We've also added a new widget in the dashboard providing trend analysis for storage utilization in the system. And for customers that use PV encryption, you'll now get the ability to rotate internal keys, similar to cluster-wide encryption that was introduced in 4.16. Azure customers can now use Azure Key Vault to secure persistent volumes, as this became GA also in ODF 417. And for customers that replicate object storage between clusters that leverage a new capability using improved bucket logging mechanisms across OpenShift clusters to accelerate replication. To make the object data highly available and transparent for the application, customers can now replicate accounts across clusters. In addition, customers can use client security token service in a similar way as is used in AWS. Next.
Thank you, Drew. We have matured out image-based install technology for general availability in OpenShift 417. Our goal was to reduce the time it takes to install single-node OpenShift nodes at the far edge and to provide operational communality between upgrades and installations. With this new shift-left methodology, a telecommunication service provider or other far edge customers can prepare servers in a pre-production environment so that there is significantly less installation work to do when provisioning single-node OpenShift nodes at the far edge. The next and final phase of our image-based technology suite will be to develop a procedure for rapid server replacement when there is a catastrophic hardware failure at the far edge. We will deliver this in future release, and it will complete our triumvirate of image-based install, image-based upgrade, and image-based break fixes. With that said, I'll pass the mic to Daniel.
Thanks. Let's look at Red Hat Device Edge and Microshift, which is our small form factor Kubernetes distribution. The highlights in this release are we now have IP version 6 support with singles and dual stack integration. And my personal favorite new capability is we now support low latency or real-time workload with Microshift. This will actually make a splash at KubeCon North America on November the 12th, so watch out for more details to be shared than in a press release, for example. Last but not least, there is now dev preview support for Microshift with the new rel image mode approach we announced at Red Hat Summit earlier this year. Next, please.
All right, OpenShift AI. We will not get into the details of OpenShift AI, but just wanted to inform you that in about 4 weeks in November, there will be a session scheduled for OpenShift AI. Keep an eye for the invite. The roadmap for OpenShift AI and Rel AI will be discussed. Also, what's new in the recent releases. So keep an eye for that. Definitely encourage you to join and hear more about the details of what's coming in those products. And with that, I will wrap the session today. That's all we had planned. We are excited about this release. I hope you also are and ready to kick tires on this